If you've got any questions, please do ask them, and I shall attempt to answer them.
It's just a general thing. I think, do you work more from the kind of mediumship side in your animal communication than other communicators? And is it something you can learn if you're not very highly intuitive?
I believe animal communication, the ability to communicate with animals, is our birthright. I believe anybody can learn how to do it.
Right.
Now, obviously, if you've got a degree in some very scientific subject, or you're a lawyer or somebody that's used their left brain, their left hemisphere, and they're highly analytical all their life, then it might take me a little while to, perhaps you need to have a bit stronger meditation practice, or it doesn't necessarily mean that. I'm just saying that it's this, obviously the inner cynic is more likely, we might have to work a bit harder to get through that.
Right.
But it's absolutely everybody's birthright. And it does, there's plenty of doctors, lawyers, left brain people who are also artistic. And to me, we're using the other side. It's probably overly simplistic, but we're letting our minds go a bit still for a second, or we're communicating from our heart. So it's actually a heart-to-heart communication. It's not head-to-head telepathy, thankfully.
Right.
It's actually a heart-to-heart. You sort of duck under your head, and you just, it's a love link. So I can't remember your question now, but yes, anybody can learn it. I believe it's entirely teachable, and anybody can learn it. And I don't know how I stack up in relation to other animal communicators.
Well, you seem pretty, tip top.
Well, that's very sweet. But what I mean is, I don't know. When I used to do a lot of introductory workshops. Now I do a longer training because I want to set people up for success. I don't want them to give up. Do you know what I mean? So I want to set them up for success. So now I don't just do a weekend workshop anymore. But I did loads of those, and you could get somebody to receive information from an animal after a weekend. But they couldn't necessarily link in for an hour. Do you know what I mean? That's a muscle that needs to be practiced.
Right.
But most people got, I would say 99.9% of people got some clincher or some information that made them believe that they communicated. They received a thought from somebody else's animal. It wouldn't be their own animal. We never start there. We always start with other people's animals. That's how you get the proof. And but of course, when they go home, their inner critic, their inner cynic, will start to undo that piece of evidence.
Right.
Go, well, anybody could have done, and well, I tried on the sheep in the fields opposite. I couldn't hear anything, so it can't be happening. Well, no, because your sheep's probably not communicating. And anyway, that's the worst place to start on farm animals, where they're all in a flock. It's a disaster, So so that's what I mean by the inner cynic undoes our good work. And so when I teach people, I get them to have a little success notebook. And you can do this if you're playing with it yourself, or any intuition, or wondering who's, when you hear the phone ring and you try and practice guessing who it is.
Right.
You just go still and go, like, who is that? Yeah. So you get a little success notebook, and every time you get anything, like a strong feeling that you should have gone to the post office that day, and then you met Mrs. So-and-so and it was just perfect because you needed to blah, or whatever, I don't know. Whatever your little successes are, you put them in your success notebook, but you never write the failures in there. And then eventually you're training yourself to go, no, this is actually happening.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my chap, Paul, Lynn, well, a few of you will have met him on the Christmas special. He can do the animal communication. When I first met him, he was quite, well, I don't know how logical he actually is, but he was quite blokish, let's put it that way. He'd been in the army. He kept on looking. I would occasionally see him looking at me in a sort of quizzical, sort of weirded out way. I think this is the best way of putting it. And I realise now, having spoken to him, obviously I've been with him quite a few years, that he was checking to see if I was insane intermittently. He wanted to know whether I was a nutter, really, was his way. And then because he just wasn't, obviously the whole animal communication thing and other things that I would say, was a bit like, not sure about her. And then eventually he was surrounded by it. He'd hear me speaking to someone on the phone, or I'd go, oh, I spoke to a dog today and they said this, and this, or, whatever. And eventually, over a period of a year to 2 years, he kind of went, oh no, this is actually happening. But I couldn't teach him to do it before that point. He's largely unteachable because he's a very stubborn person. And but then he sort of learnt it via osmosis. And he learnt very quickly then. So as soon as you think it's possible, it's very easy to learn it. But it's not easy to maintain it in isolation. So like you've got to be around other people who are practicing.
Right.
Otherwise, you just go off on your own and you think, oh, I can't do it. It doesn't take a lot to sort of feel a sense of failure. Yeah, that's a long answer, isn't it?
Oh, that's great though. Thank you.
So yeah, and also I became a medium. I developed my mediumship before I developed my animal communication. Oh, but what I was saying about the workshop was that people would come on the workshop, and I sort of actually tricked them by showing them a picture of an animal of mine that was in spirit, and they didn't know that that animal was in spirit. And it was be the first animal that I showed them with a photograph, because I've got so many in spirit, not so many in photograph form. And they would get information, they'd learn, they'd start picking up information. And then I'd say that animal's actually in spirit. And then they got over, because I think they would have been blocked if they thought, oh, I can speak to a living one, but I don't know whether I'm going to be able to speak to one in spirit. But it feels identical. I'm not doing anything different. When someone shows me an image of an animal that's in spirit, I'm doing exactly the same thing. I imagine that animal in front of me. I don't look at I only look at the photograph for a bit, and then I imagine that animal in front of me, and then I go down to my heart. So I feel the love I feel, that's the dialing up. And then I start going, well, they usually start talking to me, but if their person's there, they do. But I might have to say, how are you? Usually if I'm, if I turn up at someone's yard and talking to their horse, I've sort of got to introduce myself to the horse and what I'm doing. But it's exactly the same. So it doesn't matter whether they're in spirit or in body, I'm still imagining them in front of me, which is why I'm looking away from the camera a bit. And it's just a mental image. It's nothing more than that. But I've just learned, and I don't always trust it, but I have probably got nothing else to go on. So I have to go on what comes into my mind. Otherwise I'm lost. Well, I'll just look at you blankly and smile. I've learned to just go and just go with what comes in. And if I can do it, you can do it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we all could do it. I think we all would have been able to do it, It's hard to do it if you've been doing I find it hard once I've been doing a lot of maths. If I've been doing my accounts or lots of sums for some reason, or Paul finds it hard if he's been to work and he's been doing spreadsheets and stuff, he can't flick the switch quite as quickly as he could if he'd been doing something more relaxing, or he'd been for a walk, or he'd meditated for a bit. I think it's a right hemisphere occupation, like art, dancing, or dancing when you let go type dancing, or poetry, or it's a right-brained activity.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. So anyone that does want to, I have got an apprenticeship starting 7th of March. You're welcome to join, and it's all online, but we do we're doing 10 sessions of Zoom calls. So you're not just left doing an online course, you know, you're going to be, we all practice on each other's animals as well. So there's a load of exercises to do at home, going out into nature. It's sort of based within a shamanic framework or a druidic framework, so that you're developing you're deepening your connection to the natural world, and you're developing your awareness by sitting under trees or walking out in nature or what have you, as a way of kind of grounding you, and doing it in a very balanced way, because obviously when you develop your animal communication, you're developing your seership as a whole. So if you learn how to talk to an animal, you end up being able to learn how to talk to a spirit person or a tree even, or whatever other beings there are out there. So I do it, I always teach within a earth-based tradition, because I think that's a very balanced way. We work with the 4 elements, etc. But there are these 2-hour Zoom calls once a fortnight, 10 sessions for starters anyway, for the foundation part, and then we swap. You know, you'll be able to swap your little pictures of your animals with other people and practice that way. And, you know, thank you all for being here, and great, thanks for being good sports. Yeah. All right.